Would you like me to read you a ghost story? How about a Christmas ghost story? This one is titled A Christmas Carol, based on the book by Charles Dickens. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve in London, England, horse-drawn carriages were the primary means of transportation. Candles and gas lamps were the primary sources of light, and fireplaces were the primary sources of heat. In those days, a miser named Ebenezer Scrooge employed a clerk named Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit had a wife and 6 children, including a crippled son named Tiny Tim, who was very ill. Scrooge's nephew, Fred, came to their office. "Merry Christmas," yelled Fred.
"Humbug," said Scrooge. "If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart."
Fred invited Scrooge to dine with him and his wife the next day, but Scrooge refused, so Fred left, but not before wishing Scrooge and Bob another Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. As Fred left, 2 portly gentlemen entered. Because the sign outside the office read, "Scrooge and Marley's," one of the gentlemen asked Scrooge, "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead for 7 years," replied Scrooge. "He died 7 years ago, as of this very night." The man offered his condolences, but asked for a donation for the poor. Scrooge told him that he already paid taxes to support prisons and workhouses, so anyone who was poor could go there. "Many would rather die," exclaimed the gentleman. "Then let them do it," replied Scrooge, "and decrease the surplus population." Upon hearing this, the gentleman left. At closing time, Scrooge begrudgingly told Bob to take Christmas Day off, but to return to their office early on the next day after Christmas. That night, as Scrooge sat by his fireplace, eating his supper, the ghost of Jacob Marley appeared to him, wrapped in heavy chains. "These are the chains I forged in life," said Marley. "Your chain was as long as mine 7 years ago. It is even longer now." Then Marley explained to Scrooge that he would be visited by 3 other ghosts. "Take heed," Marley admonished Scrooge, "if you wish to shun the path I tread." The next ghost was the spirit of Christmas past. This spirit showed Scrooge visions of Christmases, which he had celebrated as a child and a young man. Scrooge remembered how much joy his employer, a fat old man named Mr. Fezziwig, had shared with his employees and neighbors at his annual Christmas balls. Scrooge wished that he had shared a kind word with Bob. The spirit also showed Scrooge how he allowed a young woman named Belle to break off their engagement because he valued money more than her love. Scrooge could bear no more. "Leave me, spirit," he cried, and fell asleep. The next ghost was the spirit of Christmas present. This spirit showed Scrooge visions of Christmas parties at Belle's house and Fred's and at Bob's. When Bob proposed a toast, Tiny Tim cried, "God bless us, everyone!" When Scrooge saw how frail Tiny Tim looked, he asked the spirit if he would live. The spirit predicted that the child would die within the year. "No!" cried Scrooge. "Say he will live!" "If he's going to die," replied the spirit, "he should do it, and decrease the surplus population." Scrooge bowed his head in shame. The spirit also showed Scrooge how people celebrated Christmas all over the world, on battlefields, at sea, and in lighthouses and mine shafts. Finally, the spirit showed Scrooge a wretched boy and a wretched girl hidden inside his robe. Scrooge asked if they had no refuge. "Are there no prisons?" asked the spirit. "Are there no workhouses?" Again, Scrooge bowed his head in shame. Then a clock struck midnight, and Scrooge found himself alone in the dark. Eventually, he was able to discern the final spirit standing still and silent before him, in a dark robe and cowl, barely discernible in the dark. Scrooge asked if he was the spirit of Christmas yet to come. The cowl moved as the spirit nodded. This spirit never spoke, nor revealed his face, but it showed Scrooge visions of his corpse lying unmourned under a sheet on his bed, with the bed curtains removed, rings and all, and with cats and rats scratching at the wood nearby, eager to feast on his flesh. The spirit showed Scrooge where his employees and an undertaker would take his belongings to a pawn shop in one of the least desirable neighborhoods in London. The spirit showed Scrooge Bob's family as they mourned the death of Tiny Tim. He also saw his fellow businessmen discussing his death as if it were less important than the weather or what they were going to eat for lunch. The spirit showed the joy a young couple shared in learning that he was dead, and knowing that whoever inherited their death could not be more cruel and unforgiving than Scrooge. Finally, the spirit showed Scrooge his own grave, neglected in the cemetery. Scrooge threw himself on his knees and, clutching at the spirit's dark robe, begged him for another chance to change his behavior and to celebrate Christmas every day of the year. Then Scrooge realized that he was clutching his own bed curtains on Christmas morning. He sent a prize turkey anonymously to Bob's house for their Christmas dinner. Then he went to Fred's to ask if he was still invited for Christmas dinner, which, of course, he was. The next morning, Scrooge caught Bob coming in late to work, and just when Bob thought he was fired, Scrooge told him that he was going to increase his salary and help him get the medical care that Tiny Tim needed to save his life. Scrooge was as good as his word, and although he never saw another ghost, he spent the rest of his life celebrating Christmas every day, as well as anyone could. May this be said of us all, and as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.